Roundtable, the EBS Evidence-Based Services Committee Roundtable, as hosted by State of Hawaii Child and Adolescent Mental Health Division. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Jeffrey Okamoto present on media and the developing brain and body. As a quick introduction, very quick introduction about Dr. Okamoto. For more than 25 years, he has been a developmental behavioral pediatrician for Kapiolani Medical Center for Women and Children and faculty at the John A. Burns School of Medicine. Dr. Okamoto obtained his degree at the John A. Burns School of Medicine at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and his residency in pediatrics was at Kaiser Permanente, Los Angeles, and his fellowship in developmental behavioral pediatrics at the Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. In addition to his work in developmental disabilities, he is also an expert regarding health issues in school systems and is a past chairperson for the Executive Committee for the National Council on School Health of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So without further ado, let's give, well, I think people are muted, but know that people are very happy that you're here, Dr. Okamoto. Could give you a round of applause if we could. One quick housekeeping thing before we turn it over to you. Albert, was there a housekeeping thing about the CEU something?
Yes, I'll be putting into the chat in just a second.
Okay, yeah, so so big picture, I know some of us have signed up for CEUs as sponsored by CAMD for social work. An update on there is Tommy will be putting some details in that. Please monitor the chat about procedure about that and follow up on that. If people have questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. We have Tommy and Albert who will be moderating. They'll keep track of the questions and try to circle back with Dr. Okamoto at the end, giving him a list of those questions. Anything else, Dr. Okamoto, before we start?
Nope, that's great.
Take it away. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm happy to talk on this. I was actually asked to talk on this subject by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Hawaii chapter. And it was great because I got to do a little bit of looking into this subject for my own clinical practice, but I think it's a really interesting area and certainly so much going on around media and kids. So my objectives is to kind of show how does media use seem to affect brain development and behavior, and also even the physical health of children. You know, big thing is a lot of people are worried about obesity and media, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then there's lots of worries that people have, and I think my hope is that the talk is balanced, that it actually talks about all kinds of opportunities that we have from media, but certainly a lot of people are worried about the amount of time kids are on media and, you know, how it affects them. There are some really nice things for families to use, so I'll show some resources that you might want to share with families if you do work with them and you want them to help their children use media more effectively. So traditionally, when we use the word media, we used to talk kind of more about, you know, newspaper, magazines, or print media, and then television, movies, and radio. You know, that was sort of media. And usually it's created by like some kind of production source, like a film studio or somebody who's writing things and the editorial staff. And traditionally it was very passive. You know, you just kind of watch things or listen to things or read things. This new digital media age, I think, is amazing in that you pretty much have instant access to a lot of things. So previously you had to go out and buy something and, you know, peruse it, but now it's like, wow, you're just faced with so many options. There's also lots of social content, and the users, actually, people who are using media, can actually create content. Both traditional media and digital media has lots of marketing, And, we can talk briefly about some of the business side and the marketing parts to kids in particular. So right now, there's a lot of integration. It's not just passively view things, although kids certainly do a lot of YouTube and watching things passively. There's a lot more interactive media and video games, for example, instead of just, sort of being a passive user and a one-person user, you can actually interact. You can inhabit worlds that the people who are producing the video games have made, but you can also interact with other users in real time. What to me is sort of amazing is the more I read about media and how pervasive it is, it's just almost incredible. So in terms of tweens, which are 8 to 12-year-olds, they're spending about 5 hours per day. And now this is outside of school and outside of homework. And then the teens are spending more than 7 hours per day, according to this 2019 poll that they had. And the media is, of course, including TV, video games, internet, reading and listening to music. So that's, there's all kinds of media. And later in my talk, I think you'll have an appreciation that we have to be a little bit careful when we're looking at research around media, because there can be a difference between the different types of media. Even within digital media, there can be differences on how people are consuming it and what the issues are around it. So this comes actually from Common Sense Media. So the next few slides, it's a really nice resource if you want to look at some of the sort of national research, and they try to keep their surveys up to date. So a lot of nice things. And this particular graph shows the difference between 2015 and 2019 in terms of where are they watching TV? And so, of course, initially it's mostly on TV sets. And then there's this time-shifted TV watching that you can do. And then you can, of course, watch TV on your smartphone or tablet or whatever. And you can see, of course, it's increasing towards other devices and to having time-shifted viewing. This graph here shows difference between tweens and teens and how much do they enjoy it, like a lot, what percentage enjoy online video viewing, and how much, what percentage watch every day. And as you can see, the difference between 2015 and 2019, it's just going up and up. And but what's interesting also about this, it's not 100%. So there's not 100% of kids watching online video every day, but it's a high percentage. Here's an interesting statistic. It's the smartphone ownership. So the graph shows the age here. So these are 8-year-olds and who own smartphones, and that's already a percentage. And of course, the majority of kids, by the time they hit young adulthood, are starting to own smartphones. And you can see there's obviously an increase from 2015 to 2019, where there's much more percentage of kids at every age group that own a smartphone. And then this graph is about the mobile devices in the home. And so whether or not they have their own tablet, and whether or not there's a tablet in a home, which is a huge percentage have a tablet. They may not have their own tablet, which is a pretty good percentage already, but at least there is a tablet and then a smartphone that's in the home. And so it's very interesting. I know the DOE has been needing to do a lot of distance learning, and whether or not the home actually has, enough technology to actually do the distance learning. So it's kind of interesting, the DOE has been providing a lot of families tablets and computers, but increasingly, I think most homes are going to have that. Now, here's an interesting research that looks at a low-income minority community. This one happened to be Philadelphia. This is a low income, and it's interesting how many homes in a low-income neighborhood have devices. We all kind of expect that most places will have TVs, but tablets and smartphones not too far behind. And then almost all children use mobile devices. And what's astonishing is most started before age 1. And I'm not sure if a lot of you have seen kids in clinic and talk to them and find out when they start to get good at it. But a lot of parents will say, yeah, my child's very proficient, 2 years old, 3 year old, they're already finding YouTube videos. It's kind of almost incredible. So at age 2, most children had used a device daily, and most 3 and 4-year-olds can use devices without help. And at age 4, half the children had their own television, and many had their own mobile device. Now, here's an interesting thing having to do about income and the use of screen and media. The higher income homes for the tweens and the teens actually have a lower use than the lower income folks, right? So this previous study has these huge percentages, and in some ways it kind of makes sense. It'd be actually, interesting in Philadelphia for the rich families what the percentages are. There'll probably be similar percentage of uses, but the hours that people are on is more for lower income folks. And you can kind of start to make some hypotheses on why that is. Here's some graphs showing use, particularly among social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. YouTube is actually the most popular online platform, and they use that a lot. So this column is the people say they use it most often, and the YouTube is 30%, and Snapchat is also very high. So communication is kind of moving from voice only and then also face-to-face is moving to sort of screen-to-screen interactions, FaceTime and Skype and Zoom. And I think the COVID pandemic has certainly highlighted that, you can do a lot of reaching out, staying connected screen to screen. There's a lot of texting. There's emojis in the texting. And this Pew data, which is pretty old, said that the teenagers between 14 and 17 they send a median of 100 texts a day. So I'm so old, so I'm not at 100 texts per day myself, but I'm hoping to work up to that. And the nice thing is you can actually text message while playing a game or using an app. So you can multitask, right? So there's lots of opportunities from media. So I do want to highlight that. And this is from an AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement. It says that early learning and exposure to new ideas and knowledge can occur. And then the technology can facilitate new ways of expressing, sort of for adolescents, expressing things to connect and get validation from others. You can actually access health promotion messages, so that can be a really nice way of getting our health messages out there. And you can actually even change health behavior with certain apps. And a good example of that is like a running app. So you can, load a app on your phone to keep track on how much you're running and, your routes, and you can compare with friends and how fast you're running it. And, that's a way of actually changing your behavior by, monitoring how you're doing on your running. And that can be done with all kinds of different sports, of course. So that's just one example of being able to improve your health behavior using technology. The benefits of media use, though, do depend on the age of the child, developmental stage, child's characteristics. I won't go too much into that. My talk will be mostly like, sort of age groups and developmental stage. But of course, depending on whether or not you have any type of skills or if you have disability, that's going to also affect the benefits that you might get from media use. And then how you use the media, and we'll talk about that with a lot of the research. It's really interesting how they show that if media is uh, used by just a child alone versus with others, that makes a difference. And of course, the content and the design of the media can have a difference, make a difference on the benefits. Okay, so to talk about sort of age groups, um, infants and toddlers, there's this big recommendation that we really should discourage media exposure for children younger than 2 years. And we should basically try to, discourage that. And research behind that was that in-person interactions with parents much more effective than video for learning, particularly verbal, but also nonverbal problem-solving skills. So I'll go over some of the research on that. There's a lot of thinking that infants and toddlers have a video deficit, and that kind of means that they have difficulty learning from two-dimensional video representation. When you're sort of going through the world in real life, you're in a three-dimensional world, and you can kind of reach out and touch things, and you can experience the world in many different senses, and it's 3D. And all of a sudden, you're looking at this media thing on a smartphone or a tablet, and it's 2D. And not everybody can sort of understand that. And I have to tell you a funny story. So I had a child recently in my clinic, and the parent said that he saw his face, on the screen when they were trying to do some kind of distance learning, and he completely freaked out. He cried for 2 hours. They don't even understand what happened, what he was so disturbed about. Now he doesn't want to get near a computer. So what a child understands when they see things on the screen and what it means, that's really important. And so before 2 years of age, they're still developing all kinds of different cognitive, language, social, emotional, and sensory motor skills. And it really requires hands-on exploration. I really have to be careful about thinking baby Einstein, that's going to be, that's going to be it. We can, have them develop well just by looking at something. So some research has shown that in this very young toddler age group that they can learn things, but particularly if the parents watch with them and the parents reteaches the word, and they'll use the videos as kind of a scaffold to build the child's learning skills. Okay, so the parent role is important. So in one study of low-income families, they had these 14-month-olds, and they showed that if the mothers talked during the TV programming, these toddlers had more advanced language development than the infants where the mothers didn't talk. But the researchers are wondering, well, maybe these moms, of course, just talk a lot in general, not just during the media time, but building relationships with TV and video characters has had some evidence where it seems to show improvement in toddlers' learning. So kind of getting to know Elmo or Dora can be a good thing. And then so some researchers decide, okay, we're going to give some 20-month-olds this sort of this doll, and then we're going to have a video demonstration about like nesting these cups. So all the cups had to fit together in a certain way. And interestingly, it shows like, oh, when they have this bond with this on-screen character, they kind of learn how to do that kind of nesting skill a little bit better. But unfortunately, the group that didn't get the interactive toy actually did better with language than the ones that did get the interactive toy and the video demonstration. So here's a very recent study that looked at quite a number of kids in Toronto. And 78% of the parents said that the kids spent no time on mobile devices. And then the other 22% spent quite a number of minutes in a certain range. And they found that an increase in 30 minutes per day in mobile media device use was associated with expressive speech delay. You had a 2.3 times increased risk with the increase in 30 minutes a day of device use. Other communication delays like receptive language was not linked to that, but the expressive language was. And then there's some worries about sort of violent and inappropriate content. And this study showed that the preschoolers that went from sort of inappropriate and violent content to pro-social and sort of higher quality content had significant improvements in externalizing and internalizing behavior. So a more recent study, this one was from 2013, more recent study from 2019 looked at externalizing and internalizing behaviors. This is the study that got lots of press because it really seemed to show that kids had a lot more inattention from screen time. So they used the CBCL child behavior checklist and put a table up here. So they looked at attentional problems and aggression. And aggression actually with more than 2 hours daily had an increase. But the big increase was in attention with a 0.01 p-value. So this got lots of press and ended up, making a lot of people alarmed. Are we causing, a number of kids to have ADHD later in life? So we'll have to see what comes out of the research from that. There's also a recent study that looked at quite a number of moms and children in Canada, and they looked at kids over time, so at 2 and 3 and then 5 years of age, and they sort of wanted to see how the kids did in terms of watching screen time at age 2 and 3, and then how did they do on developmental tests later. And this is for all the psychologists. This is for all the psychologists who later on can come to my office and explain to me what this really is about. But they used the Ages and Stages questionnaire, which is a very, very popular developmental screening tool. And then they also looked at screen time at 2 and 3 and 5 years of age, and then tried to look at all the correlations. And they found that their research seemed to show that excessive screen time leads to developmental delays. And it's not the other way around, because some people would say, well, kids with developmental delays, maybe they have more screen time because the parents are trying to manage their behavior. And this research, being that it's time driven, looking over ages, seemed to show that it's really that they have worse developmental progress with increased screen time at earlier times. That's a very interesting and very provocative study trying to relate the development from the screening to the amount of screen time. Okay, so we do have some opportunities as practitioners in terms of having parents be part of their infant and toddler learning. And so, we really want them to interact. So, you can use digital media. And I actually think this talk is really not about zeroing out media. I think that's a really hard thing to try to have your parents do. And I think you will probably face a big mountain for that. But, to have parents understand that they have a role in learning and they can do that alongside their kids while the kids are experiencing digital media. And then if, they really can't decrease or modify the amount, the least they can do is go to high quality content. And there are some very nice resources like Common Sense Media that helps parents with ratings on digital media, movies, all type of, a number of type of the apps, a number of type of things. Okay, so there's some opportunities for school-age children that there's some research and anecdotal reports that there's benefits in terms of communication and engagement. And many social media platforms do provide tools that students can use to work on projects together. So they can, of course, work on academics together. And then, of course, communicating across distances. This is what COVID is telling us is, yeah, I can still play violin with somebody in Bulgaria, we can all make a video together playing our instruments in our separate locations. So I think kids can certainly make use of all of those goodness from media. New ideas can, be shown, and also more immersive learning experiences can be done in digital media. And then traditional and social media can raise awareness of current events and issues, and can provide the tools to promote participation and more civic engagement. So there's lots of opportunities for school-age kids. We also know that high-quality TV programs can improve cognitive, linguistic, and social outcomes. So Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, there was some research behind those shows and what the effects were on kids. And there's many observational studies and some small experimental ones that demonstrate that preschoolers can learn reading and writing and pro-social skills from high-quality TV programs. So school-age kids can benefit from that too. What's really interesting though, when you look at the apps for children, very few of the apps in the educational section of the app stores have evidence-based design input, and many of them have very low educational potential. They tend to target only rote skills, learning ABCs or colors, often not based on any established curriculum, and there's almost no input from developmental specialists or educators. So a lot of apps, not so good. And then there's a lot of challenges for our school-age kids. So we'll talk about obesity. There seems to be a lot of studies on sleep. And then we're worried about inaccurate, inappropriate, unsafe content. So I have a number of slides about that. And then privacy and confidentiality, we'll talk about that. So for obesity, there's lots of studies. Some of these older studies, we're looking at TV and increasing the odds of being overweight. And this particular study, because they were comparing 5 hours and those that were watching between 0 to 2 hours, this is the study that influenced the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation for 2 hours or less screen time for kids 2 through 18 years of age. So that's the magic number here is 2 hours in that particular policy statement. And heavy TV use during the preschool years have small but significant increases in BMI. And there's an association between using more than 2 hours of media per day, even adjusting for the children's psychosocial factors. So a study of 2-year-olds found that BMI increased for every hour per week of media. You would have a concomitant increase in body mass index, which is our main way now of looking at weight given the child's height. So we use BMI as one of the markers. More recent studies suggest that, well, we should change from that 2-hour policy to maybe 1 to 1.5 hours. So this newer worldwide study, they looked at waist circumference, TV in the bedroom, computer in the bedroom, eating pattern scores, and interestingly, all of these were positively correlated, including physical activity. These children did more physical activity with more screen time. That's kind of interesting. Here's another very recent study. They looked at 4,500 kids in the United Kingdom between the ages of 9 and 10. And then the kids who spent more than 3 hours daily on screen time, they were less lean and they showed more signs of insulin resistance. And so they're worried about this huge epidemic of new folks that are going to have type 2 diabetes. The interesting thing about this study has this whole relationship with ethnicity also, that they found that the kids who are more likely to spend over 3 hours, that's 23% of Black children compared to 16% of white children, 16% of South Asians. So it's sort of disproportionate with the Black children in this study in England. This old study shows that we affect things though by teaching kids how to, use their time in a better way to decrease the amount of time watching TV and playing video games. This particularly was an 18 lesson, 6-month curriculum. So that's kind of a heavy duty thing, but they did show that they can reduce TV viewing and having meals in front of the TV and decreasing BMI. So we can definitely affect the media sort of consumption. Okay, now the next few slides on sleep. There's a growing body of evidence that media use negatively affects sleep. I have my smartphone to turn yellow once 9 o'clock rolls around. And so, there's research showing correlation between sleep and that blue tinge on your smartphone. So later bedtime after using evening media use and then violent kind of sort of content can be contributing factors to poor sleep. And then they're worried about this endogenous melatonin from the emission from screens. So there's this huge systematic review looking at 67 studies, and the majority of the studies showed adverse associations between screen time and sleep health. And most of it is because the bedtimes were much later and the kids were spending less time sleeping. So they're spending more time watching YouTube and playing video games and doing media than sleeping. And then there's some effects on development because of TV. And there's been a number of population-based studies that show associations. So the initial research are all on TV viewing. Here's some research from TV. So these studies seem to say that, well, some of the reasons for bad outcomes is that, you're viewing inappropriate adult content. You're also having decrease in parent-child interaction when we're watching TV. And then maybe there's poor family function in households that have high media use. And there's all kinds of bells and whistles with digital media. You got things, bright lights, and things that they, animate. And there's a lot of worry that, it's those features don't really help the kids comprehend content. That may actually maybe decrease their comprehension of things, and whether or not these rapid shifts of paying attention to these stimuli, whether or not there's going to be long-term effects on children attention. So there's this gigantic review, and I'm happy to share any of these articles. I have a lot of these all in PDFs. So, but this one here had 58 studies, 480,000 participants in all of these studies. This is a huge range of time with these studies. But they're trying to look at academics. So the outcomes that they were trying to look at are school grades and their performance, academic achievement tests, academic failure data, or self-reported academic achievement school performance. And then they did a meta-analysis on a subset from the larger sample with the more rigorous studies, more recent studies. And they found that, interestingly, the types of media is very important, and that television watching was linked to poor overall academic performance as well as poor language and mathematics performance. So that's for TV watching. And then time spent playing video games also had a sort of a negative outcome. But looking at overall in this meta-analysis, everything together did not actually show a negative outcome, but these particular video games and TV watching did. And then also adolescents were more affected than children. So that's kind of what they got all of their big sort of systematic analysis and their meta-analysis. But it's a big review that they did. Okay, so there's lots of worries about content. This dates back to the 1960s. Congress has kind of looked at it. There's been a number of government agencies as well as physician organizations that have looked at it, and they're all worried about exposure to violent portrayals on TV and on media. So let's look at some of the research behind that. Studies that have shown that exposure to alcohol or tobacco use or risky sexual behaviors on TV and movies is associated with initiation of these behaviors. So what's the content that's important? And several studies have illustrated that adolescents' displays on social media frequently include risky health behaviors such as illegal alcohol use or overuse, illicit substance use, high-risk sexual behaviors, and then self-injury and disordered eating behaviors. Interesting, there's some research that shows like a U-shaped relationship between internet use and depression, and the increased risk is with the very low-end user, people who don't use internet, and the high-end users, the ones that use a lot. So that's something interesting to think about why that might be if that relationship actually holds up over time. And a more recent study showed social media use being associated with depression. So older adolescents who use social media passively, they seem to have declines in well-being. And I think there's a lot out in the media now that, there's folks that are going on media and they're basically looking at all these folks having terrific meals and great travel, and they're comparing their life with all these folks that on media, is having this great life. And but it seems like if you're using it actively, you're interactive with others, and you post a lot of content, that you don't tend to experience these declines in well-being as much. So there's some protective effect about being more interactive, and you're not just passively absorbing what others are posting. Another study found that the teenagers that used Instagram to follow strangers and engage in social comparisons, they had high depression symptoms. So similarly, there's, association with depression. So those that followed friends and engaged in less social comparison, they had fewer depression symptoms. Okay, so I talked previously that there's all kinds of marketing. So that was in the traditional media world. It's definitely now in the digital media world. And these social media ads, they can directly address certain sort of groups, certain individuals that they know from their previous like web searches or use of media that they can actually target them. Social media ads can also be interactive, and they are more affordable to create and disseminate. So that's nice for the marketers. We really haven't seen a lot of research about children and how the marketers are doing with reaching them through social media. But the advertisers kind of know that many parents worry that if their children are not skilled at technology, they're going to fall behind in school and in life. So our advertisers know that parents want their kids to be proficient, so they can use that, attitude, for marketing. There's interestingly a lot of privacy issues, and sometimes I don't think the children or adolescent understands how permanent um, and how public the posting can become. And the removal of such content may be difficult or impossible. And previous research seemed to suggest that the adolescents vary in their understanding of that, about privacy, and whether or not they even want to choose to use privacy settings. So there's lots of worry that, adolescents are not going to do the right things in terms of keeping some privacy. And one of the biggest examples of that is sexting, and that's where kids are transmitting their images to others through texting or through social media. It can be pretty explicit pictures as well as messages. And this particular review had 12% of youth that has sent a sexual photo to someone else 10 to 19 years of age. LA Children's did a teen health center study, and they had about half of girls and more than half of boys had ever sent a sext, and then 70% of girls and 82% of boys have received a sext. And the girls were more concerned than boys about how sexting could affect their reputation. So boys are not as concerned. And then 52% of respondents said they would be comfortable talking to their doctor about sexting. So there's an opportunity, at least half the folks, they'd be okay with talking about it. So in my clinic, it's usually been the parents have found out something and they come very quickly to clinic to talk about it. I don't think it's driven by the kids. Usually in my clinic, the parents are the ones that become aware and get very worried. So there's lots of associations with sexting. There's greater number of past year sex partners, greater odds of depression. Sexting can precede sexual intercourse. And then there's a higher frequency of sexting with LGB. We don't know about the transsexuals. And that is related to impulsivity and substance use. Makes sense that people might be a little bit impulsive and then send a sext. Depression actually fell out after they adjusted for confounders with this particular study. So there's an opportunity in sexting for clinicians. You can address risky sexual behaviors, promote wellness and responsibility with adolescents, discuss healthier alternatives. Okay, I think we're running out of time. So there's a whole bunch about child pornography and child abuse. Not saying that this is not important. And there's also lots of research on this. It's very sad because a lot of the images, very young children in these images on the web, 50% have sexual maturity rating of 1, very young kids, and 30% sexual maturity rating of 2. And these offenders meet and groom children, tend to involve adolescents more than very young children, but there's concern about all age groups. The recommendations is that parents really underestimate the likelihood that the children might be engaging in online conversation with people they don't know. So parents should really promote that, and they should monitor their children's internet use. I had some slides about cyberbullying, which is where there's bullying occurring not out on the sort of uh, class playground or after school, but just is through media. But I think in terms of our time, I wanted to kind of skip over that. We can maybe go back if we have time uh, to looking at some resources. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics has a media and children communication toolkit. And this has links for professionals and also parent caregiver resources. And I just want to talk about some of these. So here's this healthychildren.org website. And so parents can get on the web and look at all of these different materials. And particularly, I want to highlight this family media use plan. So parents can get on the web and they can develop a family media use plan. And it's really pretty pretty funky because it has this timeline for a day, and it basically starts out with that like kids can have 8 hours of media time. It just starts with that. And then, but you have to slot in, like you have to eat dinner, and then you have to do like hopefully play with some friends or talk with your family and go to whatever, some do activities with your family. And then you see that media time slowly decrease because you have to put in homework time, and that you end up having maybe 1 or 2 hours that you're going to have for media. And that's if you're healthy and you're doing all of these other activities as kids should. So there's some nice web-based tools that you can use to help your families look at media and set boundaries. Sometimes actually, if you go on the website, the family has to set boundaries for themselves too. So that's some of that, is that it's not just the kids, but the parents have to look at their media use and the models that they're having for their kids. Okay, so in summary, we should probably be sort of monitoring the content of our children's media. We want to probably limit TV viewing to prevent obesity, probably not 2 hours, 1.5 hours maybe, to prevent and decrease cyberbullying. They should educate kids about, media, how you use media and what happens if somebody is bullying you through media. And that parents should monitor internet use and use parental control software and other tools to know what are the kids doing on the media, on internet. You can use this family media use plan, and parents should really model appropriate media use, and of course interact with their younger children when kids are using media, and we can point them towards common sense media, lots of other different support structures. Right, I didn't want to take up all of the time, and I know we have somebody's going to talk a little bit, discuss this a little bit more, and also questions, so leave some time for that. I think that's Amanda's cue, maybe. I don't know.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Okamoto. Very informative, very useful, a lot of incorporation of research findings, and outstanding all around. So thank you very much on behalf of the Evidence-Based Services Committee, everyone attendance in today, and CAMD more broadly. Really quick, I'd like to introduce Amanda, who will maybe kick off some initial thoughts about this. So stepping back, big picture for you, Dr. Okamoto, as well as for anybody that has that this might be their first 1 or 2 roundtables. After the presentation, we try to get 1 or more different perspectives in terms of thoughts, reactions, questions, or comments, usually interfaced with the presenter's topic in some way, maybe through personal lived experience or research experience or otherwise. So that kind of brings us to Amanda. I'll do a brief, I'll read over her bio sketch briefly. If it's okay, the proposal for the group is I'll introduce Amanda, give her some chance to give her initial reaction. She's graciously called in today from, she's not even in the office. We're cutting into her personal time here, if you can see. You can see there, she's in her car. So thank you, Amanda. So we'll turn it over to her a little bit. And then I want to be sure to answer some of the questions that came up in the Q&A, then give if Canby leadership wants to have any initial thoughts or anything like that on the panel, and then we can turn it over to the larger chat group audience. So it can go in a lot of different directions. Without further ado, let me pull up Amanda's brief bio sketch. So Amanda Kahanui is mom to a 16-year-old son who is deaf with a quirky predisposition. He loves to watch YouTube and play video games on his phone and tablet. As an advocate for his health and education, she has served on national, state, and community boards and councils. Amanda has worked for the Special Parent Information Network, or SPIN, for the past 5 years and enjoys helping parents find their own paths to advocacy and working to improve our educational and healthcare systems here in Hawaii. So without further ado, welcome Amanda from whatever location. We won't disclose your location, but she's somewhere. It looks nice and green from her car over there. So I'll turn it over to you, Amanda. Don't give it up.
All right. Aloha, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm glad I could join you, and I'm glad I got to hear Dr. Okamoto's presentation again. I know he did it at the SPIN conference, and it was fantastic. Loved it, but I was unable to actually sit and watch it because I was helping to run the SPIN conference. So it was really nice to see it. I've seen the slides, but hearing him talk about it's really important. As you said, I am a parent of a 16-year-old who might be able to see him there on his device. He got permission just about 15 minutes ago to sit and have some time. So what we do at home is try to monitor. We're constantly monitoring what he's on social media. Right now, he does not have Facebook. He's not on Instagram, but he is on YouTube. And a lot of people don't think of YouTube as social media, but it is. And there's a lot of comments that go on. There's a lot of things that go back and forth. You know, they have their favorite people that they follow and watch. And so I didn't realize that either. I kind of had to educate myself as a parent that YouTube is social media, and that's his favorite thing to do. He goes and he has his favorite people to watch and follow and comment on. Because of some of the laws we've discovered for children, protecting children, COPA, I think it's called, they've shut down those comments for videos that are geared towards children to try and protect them, but still really having to watch. I check in on him all the time. What are you watching? I peek in, he'll pause sometimes. What are you watching? And play the video. Let me see what you're seeing. Let me see some of the comments that are on there. So it really comes back to me as a parent that I feel it's really important to monitor, but not get too nearly into what he's doing, because I want him to have some independence there, but also make sure that he's safe. I am checking in with him all the time, making sure he's, are you getting bullied? Are there inappropriate comments? I'm listening to what he's hearing too. So, and then what we do is set a schedule. We'll do, if it's an hour of social media, it's an hour off of social media. And so when he's home by himself, there's a schedule, and I'm pretty lucky he follows that pretty well. And I can also check back and look at his phone and see how much he's on, but I trust him and know that he's doing the right thing. So that's how we try and manage that, because we're on vacation right now, and having for him to say like, oh, can I jump on? I want to watch videos, or I want to do this, or I want to do that on the computer or on his phone. We really have to balance that with no, we're in a really beautiful place and you need to sit back and take pictures with your phone and not be staring at your phone. So there is a time and a place that we still allow him to do that and try and limit that interaction as much as possible, but can't keep them from it, because as Dr. O was saying, I think I'm probably one of those parents that want my kid to make sure that they are tech savvy, right? We just had 4 months of no school, and we've got to make sure that he can jump on a Zoom call, and he can do that without me, because I may have to be on my own Zoom call for work. And he's got to be able to text the teachers and manage technology on his own as he gets older, because I've got to eventually let go of those reins, right? So it is a balancing process. I think COVID has taught us a lot about technology and what its uses are in the educational field. We always think of tech as just watching videos, watching apps, doing things with it, but this has taught us about the interactivity, about the connections that we can make, positive connections that we can make, and that we don't have to limit ourselves to people in our own communities. We can connect positively to our worldwide community as well. And I think that's been pretty cool. He's doing an animation camp right now. He was actually on his phone earlier doing Lilio Kalani Trust's animation camp, because they're doing 3 weeks of camp, 2 hours a day on Zoom. And he does like Outschool and does classes there. So media and social media is one thing, but technology usage is kind of that next wave. So we do want to make sure he has access to it, knows how to use it appropriately, because this is his life as he continues to grow. We are not losing technology anytime soon unless something really drastic happens. So I need to make sure, just like we teach him how to cross the street looking both ways, I've got to teach him, yes, I'm talking about you, how to use technology appropriately. You are using technology appropriately. Him back there, his 2 cents, yeah. So any questions? That's my 2 cents. I can expand if you'd like, but I'd like to give you guys time to have questions too.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Amanda. Let's see here. That was very insightful and extremely valuable. Let me see here. Looking, if it's okay, I'm gonna look at the question and answer queue right here. Leslie, you want to?
Yeah, no, I did have a question for Amanda. Sometimes what I worry about is the amount of conflict that can come up between parents and children, trying to get them off of media, screens, or whatever. And, just that weighing the pros and cons of constantly fighting your kid, versus whatever possible negative effects of the screen time itself. So I just wonder how you weigh that out. And Jeff, you might have some really good ideas about that too.
Right, and you're right, Leslie, we do go back and forth sometimes. And I'm pretty lucky he's easygoing, but there are times when he's like, I want to continue watching videos. And I'll say it is time to stop, because we do limit it 2 hours before bedtime so that he has a chance to sort of, his brain can and his eyes can get back, lose that blue light and try and get into the right mindset for sleep. We can, I know you do. He draws, he reads and things. And so, but if he wants to say like, oh, I really want to watch another video, sometimes it depends. I might say, okay, you were really good today. You did your chores, you did what I asked you to, you can do one more video. And other times, if he's been on for a long time and he still wants to watch, then I'll say, it's my job as your parent to help your brain. And watching too much on the computer is not great for your brain. It's not great for your development. And that's my job. So if you want to be mad at me, you can be mad at me, but I'm doing my parent job in keeping you healthy. And this is what we do. But I do try to say this is part of being healthy. we eat healthy, we drink lots of water to be healthy, we wear sunscreen when we go out, and limiting our time in front of the screen is also part of our brain health and our body health. So I think he gets that. And so when I pull that card out, then he'll be like, okay, Mom, you know, and we move forward. Sometimes it's a compromise. If he's really, really wanting it, then I'll 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes, and then that's it. And I'll go, okay. And so we have to kind of go with the flow. Yeah. Sometimes we have hard and fast rules, and sometimes we, you know, as a parent, we pick our battles and right. And move forward.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add to that is I think developmentally it's easier with the younger kids to establish a lot of control. The teenagers and adolescents, number one, they often have to do homework and do a lot of computer-based things, and then it gets very milky, you know, how much are they actually doing their, you know, sort of academics on the computer versus being on the YouTube or whatever. And, you know, of course you as a parent can look in on that, but it's a lot harder, I think. So I think there's some differences between the very younger children and then the tweens and the teens.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. When he was younger, we could just like pull it. You know, we just take the tablet away, take the screen time away, turn off the television, and there, you know, we might have a fit, but that was about it. But now that he's got his own phone, he has his own laptop, because he does need that for school and other things. We do have to find that balance. But he does know that, you know, negative reinforcement or consequences do happen. And so if something happens in school and he hasn't turned in his work, or something doesn't get done, then you lose time. You lose time on the laptop, you lose time, one moment please, you lose time with technology. And that is the number one thing that I can do to kind of get him to fall in line and follow the rules or do what I need him to do, is say, if you don't do it, then it's lost time. And we put those up front so that he knows what to expect. If you don't do this assignment, it's due in a week, you're going to lose a week's worth of technology. And he goes, oh, and he gets right on his work, because that is more important to him than anything else that I could take away from him, time away from tech.
I just wanted to comment. I think Leslie's question is like super relevant, and Amanda's experience is super relevant, because I feel like this is something that I get asked about a lot, or it'll come up in the stories of, you know, when parents and kids are kind of coming in front of me, and, you know, there's the, you know, you're interviewing them and like, oh, well, what happened before, you know, the kid, you know, tried to run out of the house and jumped out the window and was, you know, well, it happened right after I just took the kids' phone privileges away for a week, because, and then you hear the whole backstory of whatever the kid did, and then the phone got taken away, and then the kid went berserk, you know, and that was just the worst possible thing the parent could have done, you know, to the kid in that moment, in the child's eyes, right? And so, you know, it's just, I do think parents need the support of kind of knowing what a healthy amount of social media and tech and screen time is kind of good for their kids. And then kind of on the other end, when you are going to have to take it away and limit it, what are the strategies that could be used, or what are some of the guidelines that might be suggested around that? Because once the screen time is there, trying to take it away or limit it it's real tough. It's real tough.
It is, and I think that we come at it like transition. He's always sort of had a tough time with transitions from one thing to another, right? And so we learned early on that you give him those heads up. Okay, we're going to be doing something different in 5 minutes. Okay, we're going to do something different in 2 minutes. Okay, we're doing something different. If I didn't do those things, if I just said, we're going in the car now, and be like, what? We're going in the car? I'm not ready to go in the car. And so I had to learn as a parent, right, how to do transitions. And the same thing for us works well with screen time. So I just don't go into his room and say, turn off the computer right now. I go into his room and I'll say, one more video. And he knows then, regardless of how, if it's 5 more minutes on that video
Right.
or 20 more minutes on that video, he knows at the end, that's it, it's time. Sometimes if I do go in and say, okay, that's it, time, you know, it's 9 o'clock or it's 8:30 and it's time to get off, and he'll say, can I finish my video? And then I'll go around and I'll look and I'll say, how much time is left? If it's 5 or 7 minutes, yeah, you can finish your video. If it's 15 or 20 more minutes, nope, I'm sorry, that's too long. You knew that bedtime was coming, and now it's time to stop. So try to have those conversations, but I do think about it as transitioning. If you just pull it away, it's sort of like like you ripped the Band-Aid off, and they do have sort of it's almost like an instant withdrawal, and they do have you know, like you've taken it away, now what do I do? They've been so focused in on that media, that tech, that screen, whatever it is, that I think they have a hard time transitioning back to real life and what that means. So maybe talking to families about approaching it as a transition from this to that.
Thank you. Excellent comments all around. To bring a little bit of comic relief, or out of comic relief, but to human, I said I can relate with 11 going on 12-year-old, and it is, I don't know if reassuring is the word, but maybe reassuring to know that battles are being waged all across the world between parents and their tweens about about this kind of thing. Maybe it normalizes it, softens the edge a little bit, but kind of jumping around Q&A stuff. Let me see here. Just wanted to close some loops here. So on the chat, Norman suggested that there are some really good parental control apps. I think Dr. Okamoto talked about that. Parental control apps and the level of control might vary a little bit by age. If people have control apps recommendations, that might be a way for people to get involved in the chat. I'd love to hear some stuff. No pressure otherwise, though. I want to try to take care of some quick housekeeping things. First question, anonymous attendee early on at 3:21. Can we get a copy of this PowerPoint so we can share this facts presented on the slides? Actually, a fun fact is that this presentation is being recorded and will be put up. It will be put up later. It'll be on the Help Your Keiki website via Candy, and that'll be available. So the actual presentation itself will be available for subsequent viewing. That webinar will be available. Second question in the Q&A, Amanda, some of my students get up in the middle of the night to watch YouTube, and I give them ideas about how to get around that problem. How do you folks keep him from doing that? So the issue is getting up in the middle of the night to watch YouTube. We had somebody weigh in at our foster home. The devices are turned in to the caregivers at night, and they had to get them radio alarms to eliminate the argument for music alarms though. So anybody else have anything to add on from the panel on the issue of getting up in the middle of the night to watch and access these things? Dr. Okamoto, Amanda, Kurt, Leslie, anything on that? Some others, I'm gonna go to the chat as well, some other things, but I'll pause here for any of it.
One thought I've heard of from people, but I don't have personal experience, is just turning off the router at a certain time of night. Just, that's it, no more internet to our house, especially if the router's in the parents' room. They can have control over it.
Yeah, that brings up the point that parents have to have a certain amount of control also, right? So if they want to continue to use media, that's going to make that solution harder to do. But I think the middle of the night one is not probably as problematic as the 8 o'clock at night one. The middle of the night, we should be sleeping. So, I think Manda had a very nice way of saying, for your health, you got to sleep a certain amount, right? And then just have, a very, kind of heavy duty rule on that, so that either, things have to be taken away or the router gets turned off or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because they're not doing their homework, right?
Yeah, because it's like sneaking out. right? Kids will sneak out, teens sneak out. It's kind of the thing that some teens do. I was one of those teens. And you try not to get caught. And if you do get caught, you're in trouble, right? And so I think of technology sort of that way too. Kids want to watch that video. They want to get on. It depends on what they're getting on technology for, to watch something, to interact with something, you know, but definitely, you know, turn off the Wi-Fi, take the device. We did not allow Ikaika to charge his phone in his room, and his tablet gets charged out, and so he doesn't have it in there. So it's not something that he has access to. And again, that is something that we say it's for your safety, so that you're not tempted to get up in the middle of the night, or you don't think about it because you're just not in your room. If you do have your kids with their phone or their tablet or their laptop, or kids to have a computer in their room because they have to do work, just setting those rules and knowing that there's going to be consequences. I think that's really, really important, the follow through. If you don't follow through with any rule breaking, you're gonna have anarchy and chaos in your house, right? So this is just another one of those things.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just gonna try to take them in order. A question from Dr. Shimabukuro. This is to Amanda. Oh, wait. Sorry, I don't know if that's a, I don't know if that's like a, I'm looking at the wrong place. I don't know if that's like a full on for everybody, or that was a back channel thing. I'll leave it there for now. From Jackson Wong, I've used Common Sense Media, commonsensemedia.org, to help gauge to show to my family. Do you know of any other resources that are helpful for measuring the quality of content?
Yeah, this is Dr. Okamoto. I think that happens to be the best one. They actually have a team that's really great at looking at things, and they actually have a lot of nice commentary about, you know, how they do their work. So you can actually look at some of the research behind why they make some of their ratings and things like that. So that's to me, that's the highest quality one.
Absolutely, me too. As a parent, that's my go-to website. You know, if I'm looking up stuff about a movie, it's IMDb, right? If I'm looking up stuff on social media or movies for my kid or books for my kid, because they're not just following apps, they're doing lots of things for kids and what's appropriate for them. So that would be my go-to, because other organizations are also using them, right? So understood.com is a great website, but they are using that as their expert in the field to figure out what it's like. So yeah, I would definitely steer parents that way.
Thank you. Let me see. Some other stuff. So more discussion about the parental apps. Some people even suggested an app or two in the chat. Yes, looks like Norma's pointing out it's really best to set the rules beforehand. So sounds like a lot of expectation setting and rule setting. That sounds to be the theme of today. I think I'm trying to skim over here. I think we've answered almost all the questions. I'm going back and forth over here. So people can continue to write Q&A stuff. I'll continue to monitor the chat. Maybe Dr. Okamoto, there was a portion in your presentation where you said we might be running out of time, and you don't know if you have time to go over it. I don't know if you happen to remember what the take home, what portion that was, or what the take home parts of that was.
That was the cyberbullying part. And there's quite a bit of research now on cyberbullying. I actually went to a workshop and the whole presentation was just on cyberbullying. And people are really using media now. Instead of, you know, going up and picking a fight with somebody in school, they are just blasting at people over, you know, media. And it's really horrible, because what often happens is one person starts in on somebody and then a whole bunch of people join in. And you might have heard some sort of highly publicized cases where people have committed suicide because they were being bullied that way. And, you know, parents need to have their kids understand that, there's outlets for when that's starting to happen, that the kids can turn to somebody to talk about that, whether or not it be the parent or a teacher or counselor. But, that's, I think, a very serious problem that's now really taking off. A lot of kids are using media to bully other kids.
It's a conversation that we've had to have with Ikaika about. I mean, we have it about bullying itself, like at school or after school programs. And I think a lot of parents don't have that conversation with their kids about cyberbullying. And they may not be aware of it themselves because we didn't have it when we grew up, right? So it's a new parenting field for many of us. Older parents, probably the younger parents may have been having some of it, but you need to talk to your kids about it. You need to tell them it's okay to tell you if they feel bad. It's okay to say if somebody says something to them, and then have that conversation. Okay, is it something that you feel threatened? Is it something that you can't get around? Is it somebody that you have to be working with or doing school with? How do we do it? If it's school, definitely, around school, let your administrators know. If it's around a program, let those administrators know. If it's through, anonymous or through some of the social media sites like, YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, then you need to have those conversations about how to get off of it, how to either leave it alone or other things. It's a difficult conversation to have, but it's a hard one, but it needs to happen. I think a lot of parents just don't have it.
Yeah, I would say that the same way that parents are often unaware that their kids are actually having sex with, classmates or other kids, they don't really know that kids are sexting and kids are being cyberbullied. And so I think just awareness for parents and for them to look out for that, that's a huge thing that we health professionals can do. Because I think some parents are not even aware that these things are happening. But I think parents often are sort of kind of in denial, right? And so when it happens, and when kids, the parents find like a picture of their child naked, they just lose it, right? So I think it's nice for us to talk to them so that they can sort of respond a little bit more calmly, and then get the right kind of supports from whoever they can get counseling from.
Thank you. This is a question that came up, Amanda, but it could apply to Dr. Okamoto as well. May I ask how much screen time do you consume? How much screen time do you consume? I'm guessing your limits would not work unless you've modeled the same thing, question mark.
That's a good question. And I'll find, well, COVID was different, right? Things before COVID and after COVID, because after COVID, most of my job was online, right? I'm doing meetings, I'm doing a lot of Zoom meetings, I'm emailing, so more than usual. And I was home and he was home. And so trying to say like, no, get off the computer, but I'm on the computer. But we had to have those conversations of I'm working and you're not working. And so we set a schedule. And we'll put times of, for class time, if it's online learning as an actual class, or if it's online learning like going to Camp Kinda or Wonderopolis or the school's website, something, and then there's equal time off. We set time for reading, we set time to go outside. I actually have to set a schedule for him to go outside and be active outside. If I don't, he would be inside waiting for the next opportunity for him to get back online again. And so I'll push it. If he's just sitting and waiting to go back online, then I'll say then it's going to be an extra 15 minutes or 20 minutes before you get online if you don't go and do something productive. So it is hard sometimes, especially if you have younger kids. They don't understand why I can be on the screen, but they cannot. And that's, parenting is hard, and we do have to set examples for our kiddos. In our house, the TV is not on during the day unless it's until evening time, generally speaking. That's just our thing. But if you've got a family that has TV on all the time, how are you going to get your kid to not watch the TV, right? So we do have to be that sort of that model and try and set a good example. We're not always great at it. And I think being honest also with our kids of like, you know what, I had too much TV today. Or if I've gotten off an hour and a half or 2 hour Zoom meeting, I'll go like, are my eyeballs spinning? You know, it might make a joke. But bringing the awareness up. If I tell him like, oh, I am so tired from being in front of the screen, or oh, I need a break from being on the screen or playing that game or, you know, doing something, and tell him how I feel about that or how my body feels about that, I think that helps to have those conversations, and so they can have permission almost to know that it's okay when your brain gets a little fuzzy because you've been on, or to recognize in themselves what's appropriate and not appropriate, because eventually we're going to have to let them go, right? So it's just part of our new parenting battles that we have to take on, something new, but I think it's really important to have those conversations.
Thank you, Amanda. As we're kind of closing it out, maybe any final words from you, Amanda, or Dr. Okamoto?
Maybe I can add that, you know, our kids do watch us as models. So I think that's really important that we are not always on media. The other thing, though, I think my talk illustrated that there's all kinds of ways of using media, right? So we're not just always passively doing stuff. We are doing interactive. So if we can model that to our kids, that, you know, it's not just, you know, sort of watching YouTube, but, you know, is to engage with it and learn from it and to use it. You know, I like Amanda's example about how, you know, her son is really interested in technology, right? So she linked things together and like, okay, you know, you want to do good on technology, you can't just be doing media, right? And whatever. So, you know, I think there's ways of having our kids understand that, you know, it's just not all consumption. Now, if you know, as an adult, you are one that just passively consumes things, yeah, I'm not sure if you're very good role model for that. I'm still very old school, and I guess because I'm older and so I use traditional media, I still read magazines, right? But you know, how our kids use digital media, which is really overtaking everything, that's a huge thing I think that we have to do to teach them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Because like I said, it isn't going away unless something really drastic happens. And so we have to teach them how to be appropriate with it, how to be interactive. I think really an important part, Dr. O, because there is so many opportunities out there right now, especially kind of post-COVID as we move forward and trying to find things to do as things locally might be closed, but things online are open. And so how then do we, you know, engage, not just sitting back and watching, but, you know, having conversations. So social media can be a way of having a conversation. He's a teenager, and so he's hit that social outrage, you know, when he sees things going on. You know, Black Lives Matter is really important to him right now because that's a typical teen thing, right? What? Injustice? Oh my gosh, we have to fix it. So how do we allow them to engage on social media appropriately and build up that sense of well-being? I often tell Ikaika, you know, if you want to get into college, they're going to check your social media. You want to go and get a job, they're going to check your social media. And then when we see an article or we see something in the news, somebody's lost their job because of something they posted on social media, that's the time for me as a parent to sit with him and say, look what happened. Here's the consequences. You posted one bad thing or you said one bad thing, and it could be 10 years ago when you were a teenager, and now you're up for the job of your life at Disney. You're trying to get that animation job that you've always wanted, and they look back 10 years ago at your social media post that you made some stupid remark, and you don't get the job? How important is it now for you to know? So just keeping that in mind, building a sense, you have to have some presence. If you don't have any presence, you can also not get that job. So there is a website out there, a guy I like, it's called Light, Bright, and Polite, something like that. That's his book that he has. I forget the name of his website. I'm really sorry, but I often use my go-to guy to kind of help build up that social media platform. We can't just cut them off. They have to have something positive there to use to show the world, to show employers, to show colleges what they think and feel and do in their local community. This is how they do it. It's no more of here's my paper portfolio. Your social media is your portfolio of what the world is seeing you. So how do we instill our kids to have a positive online presence that won't come back to haunt them in 15 or 20 years when they're up for promotion? Because the stuff doesn't go away.
Thank you very much. That brings us right about till closing. I think we're right up at 4:30. Want to be respectful of everybody's time and everything like that. So thank you again, Dr. Okamoto and Amanda. Signing off. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.